Hi, my name is Cel, and I'm your host for the SweatNet Be Amazing podcast, where we share stories of amazing women who live in our communities. My hope is that you will feel encouraged and inspired after listening to each episode. Have you ever had a question about your health, but you've been too nervous to ask the doctor about it? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. There's so many women that are struggling with the same thing, struggling to ask questions, struggling to bring up things about their health that they don't understand. Well, today my guest is Dr. Heather Graham. She's an OBGYN here in Charlotte who's getting ready to open her own practice here soon. But I'm excited to have her because we're going to have real talk about women's health issues. She's going to address some topics that a lot of times get dismissed, and she's also going to put you at complete ease that you can ask anything. So get ready for an incredible conversation with Dr. Heather Graham. Welcome to the show, Dr. Heather Graham. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be some really interesting conversation. You're an OBGYN. How did you know that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a cute little story. My third year of medical school, which is when you get your first entrance into the actual hospital doors. Other than that, you're just behind textbooks. I did my OBGYN rotation to get it out of the way because I was like, I don't want to do that. Probably for much of the same reasons these young girls I see now scrunch their noses up at me and ask me, why in the world did you go into that field? But, rather immediately I got to participate in some of those big GYN cancer, GYN oncology surgeries, and it was just amazing. And then I rotated around to the obstetrical side of things and just thought delivering babies was just about the coolest thing on the planet and just kind of fell in love with it. So we didn't do a whole lot of non-procedural work in medical school. And then the time we spent in the clinic in residency was just rather non-glamorous. So I think it wasn't until I got out on my own practicing that these sort of lasting, meaningful relationships with my patients that I've developed over the years and how I get to play a role in improving their health is really why I'm just so proud of what I do and why I chose my field. So
that's awesome to hear, because I think that there is probably, like you said, there's a glamorous side to it, but there's this other side. And the one thing that really intrigued me in the conversation we had prior was talking about mental health and how big a role that plays in what you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis with your patients.
Yeah, certainly it was not something I expected when I was in training or in residency that I would see myself, this many years later being such a forefront of how I treat women on a daily basis, but it is one of the most rewarding. So I was fortunate to get a rather comprehensive bit of education surrounding treating women in pregnancy and not being afraid of using medications when women need them for their mental health and pregnancy. But, lacking was sort of that extrapolation to just women in general. And so, just through my own experience, honestly, having anxiety and depression in residency, was when I just sort of eyes open to the fact that so many women suffer from anxiety and depression. 1 in 3 women have anxiety in their lifetimes and 1 in 4 have depression. So just as an OBGYN who, we're doing a very invasive sort of exam in that clinical setting that, you guys put a lot of trust and faith in us. So we just naturally sort of segue, I think, into this role of becoming like a good friend that you can talk to about anything. And when patients have told me that, I think as a compliment, it's one of the greatest compliments I've ever received is, being told that I'm easy to talk to or like a good friend, that they feel open to share about their mental health struggles so I can help them. And that's when I know I'm doing my job right. So.
Well, I love the part you just said about questions and about being somebody that they can trust or we can trust for not only pointing us in the right direction of doing things to be healthier, providing services that we need. But with the whole question side, do you feel like there's a lot of questions that women are scared to ask, that sometimes it takes a while to get out what the real, getting down to the bottom of it?
Totally. I mean, most women, you either see your OBGYN, I think, as I'm pregnant and I go to my OB, or I go to my GYN for my annual exam. And you don't often make an appointment just to discuss things about your mental health or sexual health or other things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's tons of questions women are afraid to ask, and I'll see them sort of work up the courage. And it's oftentimes, you know, you're mid-exam and they'll throw out a question about, why does sex hurt so much? You know, or, you know, I've never been able to figure out how to use a tampon. You know, just kind of anything and everything. And then sometimes even, you know, your hands on the door and someone opens up about that they're struggling with their mood and could use some help, you know, which is our time to kind of sit back down and take that conversation seriously.
Is there any advice that you would give someone that is struggling, like maybe right now, like whether it's they're struggling with anxiety or depression, or they have this question they want to ask, but they maybe dance around it, and just kind of to relieve them, to say it's okay to just point blank ask and there's nothing stupid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing you have to remember is that as doctors, we hear it all, and especially as gynecologists, we literally hear it all. There are no stupid questions. Everybody learned at some point. I remember not even knowing anything about my anatomy until medical school, until I learned myself. So I think one, just knowing that your doctor is a human being too, that has probably started at a you know, lower level of knowledge themselves at some point along the lines, but that you should feel comfortable to ask questions. And if you don't, then you should find someone that you feel comfortable or safe with. You know, I think thinking about it before you go to your visit, instead of just sitting there in your gown before waiting on your doctor to come in and trying to work up the courage then, but maybe writing down a list of questions and just kind of breaking it out. Maybe that paper gives you courage to refer to and look down at, especially with mental health. You know, sometimes patients don't really realize, I think, they're struggling with it till we're just in the middle of a conversation about how their year's been, and they start telling me some things they've really struggled with. So I think having a plan is always a good idea when you go into the doctor, especially if there's stuff you know you want to ask. Yeah.
Well, I like that, because for me, I know there's a lot of times I go and it just goes, well, it's that time of year, I need to go. And, you know, I don't really think about anything, like you said, until I'm sitting on the table. And then I'm like, maybe I should ask, you know? So I love the fact that just having a plan before you go in.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you said that really struck me was finding one that you're comfortable with. So if you've had this doctor this whole time, but you don't have that comfort level, then it's okay to find somebody that you are comfortable with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I remember my very first experience going to a gynecologist as a teenager and just not having the best experience. Just sort of some of the language they used did not make me feel comfortable or at ease, or that I could share things that I felt comfortable with. And, you know, you kind of don't know any better when you're that young and think that's just how it's supposed to be. And it's not. You're supposed to feel comfortable. Or you can always have the choice to get up and walk out, because this is your body. This is a very, again, invasive exam that we perform, you know, and very probing questions we ask about sexual health and your body and all sorts of things. So you just have to feel comfortable. Yeah.
So talking about your body, and I'm a big believer in this only because I had to fight for myself too, is that if you feel like something's off, like you're a good judge of your own body. Absolutely. And like asking for, like I had to ask for blood work one time, and my doctor at the time was like, you don't need that, you're too young. And I'm like, no, something's wrong. Like I'm telling you, something's not right. And she fought me on it, and then finally gave in and took my, you know, had my blood tested, came back, and I was premenopausal, but I had to fight for that. So I really believe that that's really important, right? That we have the right to speak up.
You absolutely have to be your own advocate at times when you're faced with a situation where people aren't listening. And that, I guess, should be a clue, you know, like this person's not listening. Maybe need to move on to someone that will. And that's why, you know, social media these days, you know, women, there's so many groups where people are asking all the time about who should I see for this, that, and the other. And often you'll see requests in there about gynecologists, who do you see, because I think the sort of network of women and how we all, want to help each other that you're creating, here, is a way to help find yourself the right fit and advocate for yourself that way by finding a doctor that'll advocate for you, and your concerns, or refer you if they don't know. So.
Right. Well, no, I appreciate that. And I love just the fact that we're having like this open conversation, because to me, this is as real as it gets. And then being able to have a doctor sit down and have this conversation and be open is awesome.
Thank you. I don't know at what point in my life I decided, tackling the taboo of medicine or of life, was just sort of something I felt passionate about.
Well, I love it and appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. So what 3 topics regarding our health do you think gets dismissed or pushed to the side?
Yeah. We talked definitely a little bit about mental health, and kind of along with that, I think is, we talked a little bit before about this concept of the 4th trimester. So, it's a fairly new concept that I learned about as the American College of OBGYNs, or ACOG, sort of began promoting it in 2018. And then I was at a conference last fall that was all about perinatal mental health. And there's this awesome resource online called the 4th Trimester Project. And, one of the major ideas of this is just sort of summed up by this phenomenal OBGYN at UNC named Dr. Allison Stube. And she kind of coined this term: if the baby is the candy and the mom's the wrapper, once the candy is out of the wrapper, the mom is just sort of cast aside. And I just think this speaks volumes in our cultural expectations of moms, and then sadly the expectations moms have for themselves, that it's not about them anymore. And so it's just understanding there's still a lot of support women need. So 4th trimester is definitely one. Mental health would be, right up there with it, and kind of coinciding with that as well. And then, sexual health, I think, is another topic. We do a really good job, I think, of OBGYNs teaching women, how to keep themselves safe from pregnancy and from sexually transmitted diseases. That's a pretty, common topic. I don't think most people feel nervous or scared to ask about. But when women have trouble with their libido or pain with intercourse, things like that, those are tough questions. I think those are some of the ones that get kind of thrown out mid-exam or as your hand's on the door, that are really overlooked. And sometimes I think it's due to practitioner inexperience. I know early in my career, when I got asked breastfeeding questions or sexual health questions, like I didn't have the career experience at that point, I think, because you really learn a lot from your patients too. A lot of this just isn't taught in your training, and it's more of sort of a on the job, and why some wonderful foundations like it's called ISHWISH. It's the International Society for the Study of Sexual Health exists, that several practitioners learn from, and just kind of is an ongoing medical education. So those would probably be the top 3, I think.
Yeah, and I think all 3 of those are very relevant, and a lot of it isn't talked about. And I know that even for me personally, like addressing some of that was hard for myself. So I'm like, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, and then I realized I'm not by myself because somebody else mentioned it, and I'm like, wow, we need to talk about this stuff. Like this is like real life. And especially when your hormones are changing, like that's what I've been going through, is like hormonal changes, and like I don't even recognize like what is this, like the feelings and some of the struggles that come with that. So I think this is awesome that you're addressing it. And with that, how are you addressing it? Because I know we're talking about it here, but how are you, able to address this as far as education and practice and all of that?
Yeah. So for mental health, kind of as I began this sort of aspect of my career, I did do a lot of education. I've tried to do lectures to colleagues on mental health, especially in pregnancy, and knowing the safety of medications in pregnancy. I've done roundtables in the community where women can ask questions about medication use and just mental health in general in pregnancy and what that's going to look like in postpartum and their fears and concerns. Also recently I started a professional Instagram account in terms of addressing the sexual health piece, because I think most people just don't ask those questions and just live with them. And so just trying to sort of boldly approach that taboo again. I started a Sex on Sundays. So.
Oh my gosh. Like, wait, so is this your IG name? Can you go ahead and say what it is?
My Instagram name is just Heather Graham MD, but I've started a hashtag Sex on Sundays little blog post thing where I most recently did one on sex after baby, and just sort of lots of the issues after having a child that, you know, you're concerned about, worried about, and too timid maybe to talk about, or maybe you'll talk to a girlfriend about, maybe sometimes talk to your doctor about, and hopefully not get brushed aside, you know, and just in the, well, it takes time kind of phrase. So just kind of putting it out there. Yeah.
I love that. I think this is going to go out and everybody's going to be like, what was that again? What's her IG?
Yeah. I just did one this past Sunday on exercise and improving sexual health. Too.
Oh, this is awesome. See, I love this. I didn't know this before we recorded this episode.
Yeah. So
really important information.
I guess I'm kind of getting out of my comfort zone as well, growing up as a small town girl and, you know, conservative environment, and just, you know, approaching it in a very tasteful, you know, way, but still talking about it because it's relevant to all of our lives. But then I think it's sort of the biggest way I'm trying in my own career to tackle some of that fourth trimester stuff and mental health in general is just, I'm currently stepping away from a large hospital-owned group practice and getting into a more small private practice where I can have the opportunity to focus more on just that doctor-patient relationship and strengthening that and making that the priority where you have more time to spend with your patients and address their concerns. Because one of the focuses of my new practice, outside of all the just traditional aspects of gynecology that I really want to sort of focus on or have a niche in, is just supporting women in their fourth trimester and helping them make a plan for it. Kind of the same way many women in today's world make birth plans, or we've all, I guess, for years created registries to plan for what the baby needs. And this kind of focuses much more on and solely on the mom's needs, you know, which we just sort of let go of when we have that baby, and then they're sometimes left in a little bit of a tailspin. So
yeah, and I think that that to me is important, because just like you said, it's a plan for after, but there's so many women that struggle after and then think they're crazy because they're dealing with anxiety and stress and no sleep, and you know, their body has changed again. If it didn't already change once already, we're changed again, and then they're having to adjust to that, and there's all this expectation, and so that's so important. Just from all aspects.
Yeah, looking back on my own experiences, you know, I just sort of thought, well, I'm an OBGYN, I know what I'm doing, but you know, that after part with the baby at home and, you know, the sleep deprivation and how your body even changes. One of my best girlfriends that's an OBGYN refers to the way you look postpartum as SpongeBob SquarePants, you know, and just that like feeling. And so many women talk about it, just feeling so uncomfortable in their own skin, you know, it's just stuff you're not really told to expect, you know, how to return to exercise safely, just lots of things, you know, so that we can have a better plan for.
That's awesome. Well, is there anything else that you feel on your heart you'd like to share as we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, as I, you know, started talking and thinking more about this whole fourth trimester concept in a postpartum aspect, there's also sort of a fourth trimester of life that can just expand to all women whose children may be grown up, or women who never had a child because they couldn't, or they just chose not to, that, you guys matter too. And so if you kind of take that same analogy, maybe your candy is gone off to college now, or, you never made any candy in your candy factory, but you matter too. And a lot of these same concerns, like you going through, premature menopause at such a young age that, most women get to naturally by the age of 50, just tend to let a lot of things fall by the wayside and think they don't need to be in my office. That I've even heard patients say, that they're taking my time away from the OB patients. And that just makes me so sad, because you guys spend most of your time not pregnant in our office. And, for most of your lives, and need the care of a good women's healthcare professional that can help address healthcare needs throughout your lifetime. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I identify with what you said. I know there's been a lot since I had, my candy is gone off to school, and now he's 21 and on his own. And I know that I feel like and then I was premenopausal, and then this year full-blown menopause. So it's just been like this weird space. And so I know just from my perspective, hearing you say that, makes me like, I so appreciate that. And so thank you for being on and sharing this. How can women get in touch with you?
Yeah. Right now I'm in the middle of a transition, leaving one healthcare system and going into private practice. So I have a website kind of created for this transition. It's called heathergrahammd.com. And people can email me and ask me questions about my practice, but we'll be announcing very soon. I'm so excited. I can't stand it.
I see you grinning ear to ear. Y'all can't see that, but she's like literally grinning ear to ear.
Where that's going to be and what it's going to look like. And I'm just so excited. So very, very soon, phones will be rolling for appointments and things like that. But in the meantime, I've just set up this website as a transition piece. So, yeah.
And then I feel like we could ask you anything on Instagram.
On my website, it's like, if there's something you want me to talk about, I'll talk about it, So
that's awesome.
I'll talk about it.
Well, don't be surprised if you get questions.
Okay.
Especially on Sundays.
Fair enough. That's right. Fair enough.
Well, just as we do wrap up this conversation, I thought it was so much fun that I found out that you love to paddleboard. So when did you start doing this?
Like you, I started this summer, just as part of my own exercise journey, and my candy being out of my wrapper, and deciding that it was my turn to focus on myself a little bit more. My husband actually wanted to try it, and so I was like, I want to get on there too. When you stand up and finally find your rhythm doing that, it's so addictive and so fun. So very recently, very much a beginner.
Now, do you have a favorite spot? Do you guys have like a favorite spot you go every time, or do you try to go somewhere different?
I've been mostly doing it at the beach. I've heard a lot about Lake Norman. Had some friends and actually patients that have told me about a lot of people doing it up there. I'm very interested to check out those still hopefully calm waters of Lake Norman, because the beach where I'm at currently has some rather choppy waves that prevented me from even getting past the breakers. And out there on my board yesterday, triceps are feeling that quite intensely.
Yeah, it's funny. Your feet, like even your feet gripping the board, like you'll feel like the next day I'm like, oh, what is that? And you don't even realize it, just trying to stabilize and hold steady. So, but it's so much fun.
Not realize it.
Yeah, so much fun. So we'll talk more about that offline. Last thing for you, what is your theme song right now? Do you have a theme song for your life right now?
Yeah, I think I've had a theme song for a decade. Rather non-traditional in terms of a get-going exercise music, but it's a artist named Jan Tiersen, and the album I love is Taberly. The song that I would listen to on repeat is, I probably won't say it right, but La Longue Route, or the long road. There's no words, it's just sort of like classical piano music. But the majority of my adult life, as I've learned to manage my own anxiety, has been about learning to develop just sort of a calmness and a stillness in the middle of life's chaos and turbulence, whether it's happy or challenging chaos. And so this song just helps me stay grounded when I feel flustered or I've lost my breath. And I've used it either in the very beginning when I trained for a half marathon, the only half marathon I ever done in my entire life, or when I have hours of patient charts to sit down and type up, or just simply when I have trouble turning my brain off. I call it mom brain. Most of us have it, whether you've had a kid or not, and you just can't, kind of stop that rumination at night. This song just helps me do that in a variety of ways. So
I love
I love,
yeah, that's awesome. Like, I love that you have one that's your go-to for peace.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to tell you thank you so much for being on today, for sharing with us and being a resource like
Absolutely.
that women can go to locally here in Charlotte. It's awesome.
It's my pleasure.
Well, thank you again for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me today. If you like the podcast, please like and share this with other women in your life. You can find out more about SweatNet on sweatnet.com or follow them on Instagram at SweatNet and SweatNet Charlotte. You can follow me personally on Instagram at Cel Smart. Stay tuned for the next episode of the SweatNet Be Amazing podcast.